Welcome to the Church of God Network podcast, everybody. I am here today with Aaron Farnon, who is a new friend as of like 2.5 weeks ago. We met in, I keep saying Austin, Texas, but it wasn't really Austin. That was just sort of like the closest city to where we were in Texas. But we kept the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the last day together with a group of folks from the South Texas Church of God, Central Texas Church of God, like 3 or 4 other groups. It was a great time. And Aaron and I hit it off, not only because we know some of the same people, but because we work in the same sector. We are both nonprofit professionals, and it was really nice to sort of kibitz with someone who was in the space for longer than me, who has different experiences, who themselves not only works in the nonprofit space, but actually founded a nonprofit himself with his son, which is going to be a key part of what we're talking about. But the reason we have him on is because there are a lot of folks who in the Church of God who sort of accidentally find themselves running a nonprofit or in the nonprofit space, whether it's a church nonprofit, which is sort of its own segment of the nonprofit world, or a charity. People get motivated to start things and sort of they have a passion for it, but maybe don't have some of the technical know-how in terms of running these orgs. So we hope we can touch on some things, some best practices that are helpful for anyone out there who might find themselves in that situation. But let's get to know Aaron first. So Aaron, tell us a bit about yourself, your background. Where are you from specifically? And I sort of assumed everyone was from in or around Austin, but some of you guys drove a decent way.
Yeah, so right now, it's been almost 4 years now. We live in a place called Boerne, which is spelled Boerne, Texas. My kids thought it was Born,
Yeah.
and they were like, yeah, right, like Jason Bourne, that whole movie franchise. So that's what they thought originally. But it's about 40,000 people now, and it's one of those unique places that was founded by German immigrants. They
Okay.
were trying to get to the West Coast, and a lot of them got to the point where they got to these hill country areas where they had pretty big rivers. And during that time in Germany, you weren't allowed to swim. It was against the law.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the people that came across to the New World, when they got to these big rivers, they're like, I guess this is where we're going to stop. This place is pretty cool. And that's why you'll see the hill country, Fredericksburg, Bernie, all these different
Okay.
German naming cities and towns. So, yeah,
That's
so I've been here 4 years.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah,
And before that, go ahead. Go ahead.
we got a lot of Dutch towns in New York, and one is called Schenectady, which is always hilarious to hear someone try to phonetically say that name. I mean, I would never have gotten Bernie from Bourne, but Schenectady's our equivalent. But go ahead.
Yeah. And so for me, I've grown up all over the place. So I'm kind of like this resident alien everywhere I've grown up. Because I was born in the UK, lived there for 5 years. My dad was in the music industry. Then we moved to Canada, West Coast, British Columbia, lived there until I was about 20. Then my dad said, "Hey, if you want to get college paid for the first year, you've one of two choices. One, you go to Ambassador, or you try and do it on your own." And I was like, "Never been to Texas. Big Sandy sounds big and cool." So there's not much big
It's,
about it when you get there.
there's nothing in Big Sandy. No offense to anyone from there. It's just not what would you imagine if you're from a more metropolitan area.
Right. And that's how I got my taste for Texas, though, because I love so much about Texas, except for the humidity. Everything else was great. And so that's how I actually met my future wife. But I did have a goal in Ambassador to not do the norm. I had a goal not to get married. So my goal was to get my degree and then pursue the next part of my life. But we kept in touch the whole time. So that's how I ultimately ended back in Texas. So,
Very cool. Very cool.
yeah.
How did you get started in the nonprofit world?
So it's neat that you gave an intro. It was by mistake. So, like a lot of folks in this industry, they don't necessarily plan to be their direct career path. So, I originally wanted to be an MFT, a marriage family therapist. But when we got out of college, we were poor, like a lot of college students when they get out. And we're like, we got to find a job. And my wife did teaching in a place called Bellingham, Washington. And then I took a job at Department of Licensing, and I was a driving instructor, and many fun stories there.
Okay.
But that's I started there, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this as a career. And then my wife goes, well, in Washington, we're so poorly paid as teachers, but I got this opportunity in California. And I was like, oh, great, because she's bilingual. She can speak Spanish really well. And so she was recruited to either go to Palm Springs or Modesto, California. And I said, Palm Springs, I'm not a senior and I don't play golf. So let's try Modesto. And that's how we ended up there. And then my wife did get this good teaching gig, but I didn't have a job yet because I had just quit and left. And I saw an opening at a local housing authority. And I was like, hey, that's right near where my wife is, so I can see her for lunch. And that was my impetus to apply at a housing authority. So I got there. And when I got there, they lost their grant writer. And I was like, pick me, pick me. I have
Mhm.
no idea what I'm doing. There's this concept that Jordan Peterson talks about, comfort and chaos, which if
Mhm.
you straddle it and you can find that, that's like when you're in the flow in, called flow in life. And I was like, this is a stretch, but let's go for it. So I went for it and I wrote this grant. I was way over my head. I was doing bring them in oil or whatever that concept is, right? All night and cram.
Mhm.
And I kind of liked it. I'm like, this is cool and intense, and put it all in, submitted it. And it was some glitch with the technology. And I got in with 4 minutes to spare. It was like, got it in. And
Mhm.
then 2 weeks later, we got it. And
Wow.
then that just started it. That started my career path.
Got
Because
a
from
little
there,
got a little success and a rush from it in the beginning, and it sort of hooked you in.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So that started me and pulled me in. And then, of course, as you know, in the nonprofit world, your success rate is never 100%.
Mhm.
If you can get above 34%, right now I'm hitting about 55%. So I'm pretty happy. If you can get a pretty decent win ratio, then it's kind of cool. But you don't want to just pursue money and write it to get it.
Mhm.
You really have to believe that you can perform part of what that funder wants you to do, so that you've got to balance that. So
Yeah,
but that's how I got in, and I've been
absolutely.
enjoying it.
Cool. And yeah, so you have family in the area, right? That's why we've met each other in the Austin area for the Holy Days.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. My all my in-laws live all the way from Kyle, which is near Austin, Texas. It's about 30 minutes south of Austin, all the way to San Antonio and all in between. And my wife's family, they're Hispanic, so it's a familia, really warm. And whenever they do get-togethers, they're all together. Meanwhile, my background's more that European background, where my family's scattered across the face of the earth, and we don't
Okay.
do that stuff. So
Sure.
that's a benefit of living here, especially for our family and our kids. So a
Yeah.
lot of cool stuff.
A
Yeah,
lot of brethren in Texas scattered throughout the entire
that
state.
as well.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
um, one of the things you and I talked about, because we don't, I think I had heard about you from Terry Post before I got to town, because there aren't many grant writers out there in the
Right.
Church of God. So when someone's like, "Oh, you're in a nonprofit, you should talk to this person." Um, but one of the things that I found interesting, because you're absolutely right that most people seem to get into the nonprofit sector by accident. Either you need a job and you sort of wind up there, which is kind of how I did. I went to school for history because I figured I don't really know what I want to do. Let's get a broad degree because I know I'm going to get a job and then go back to grad school once I figure it out. I got hired at a think tank, started working there, got my grad degree in nonprofit management, and like 3 months after I graduated from grad school, happened to get the idea for Church of God Network. And then it took everything that was more like, oh, these are professional skills. This is how I go into a company and help. And then it became the framework for how to serve a community I was passionate about. So I got in accidentally, but then sort of purpose found me in that sector. And it's similar. It seems like what happened with you and your son. You told me a great story about how uh, you, but I guess mostly your son was the impetus for it. Got an idea to start your own nonprofit at some point down the line. Could you tell us about that and how it started?
Yeah, because like you said, my son was the driver in it. And a lot of times in the family, that's the way it has been for me. When your kids tell you things, as a parent, you take note, at least for me, because that's kind of a big driver in my life, family, right? So one day he was talking to me. It was neat during this time in my career. I had time to pick up my kids a lot from elementary school. And at that time, he was chatting with me on the way home about how he appreciated his family and having parents and two parents. And of my three kids, he's the one that's a really good conversationalist. He wants to be a public information officer now in his career, but he just loves to communicate. And I love that about him. And he was just saying, but hey, he calls me Pops. Hey, Pops, my friends, they only, a lot of them have one parent, and they're like, I've met your dad and your mom. What, I wish I had that. And he was like, we need to do something about that. And he knows that I've done nonprofit stuff since the 90s. And he's like, you need to do your own nonprofit. He goes, something like Pops or something. I'm like, what do you mean? Like Pops, like you call me Pops, Dad, and all that. I'm like, so I'm like, okay. And I did some crunching stuff because I've got a bit of a creative thing. And I'm like, how about people without parents? Make the W
That's pretty
little.
great.
And
Yeah.
and he's like, that's it. And so that got it going. That became like our passion project. So on the weekends, on Sundays, you're supposed to work 6 days a week, but it doesn't have to mean work. So that Sunday was our passion project day where we would spend time on it. And the big thing I saw in the realm of folks like mothers, widows, that biblical construct, those are populations you're supposed to look out and help for. A lot of times in the lower income areas, a lot of grants and things give money to the people that need it, but not to the people that know how to use it. So we were like, wow. And I talked to Noel, and he liked the idea. I go, we should be giving funds to the mentors to help the mentees. So he gave an example. Hey, I got this friend. They love to play piano, but they have no money to pay a piano teacher. So I was like, we'll use funds to pay the piano teacher, and they can do the lessons. And so um, we did that for a while. Most recently, we do a thing where we teach people how to use journals, right? So I don't know if you're a journaler or what, but if you plan things down, you're more likely to have them happen. What's your 1 year plan, your 5 year plan, your 10 year plan? So we would grant these journals to kids so they can start visioning their plans out, and we'd pay for the journal. And if there's something that they had a passion for and a skill set for, we'd also pay that mentor to help them. Like if they want to learn how to do carpentry. So that was kind of the thing. And we've been doing it, I think, for like 5 years now, on and off.
I did not realize your son was in elementary school when he came up with the idea. I thought just from the conversation, because your son's at the end of high school, recently graduated.
He's 17 now, and so it was like the end, eighth or ninth grade, I think. So he was still pretty young, right? Like,
Okay,
and to me, it really hit. Like, I'm
sure.
like, whoa, that's profound when a kid tells you something and it's got some substance to it. And I feel like that concept, I've heard a sermon not too long ago, when the Holy Spirit tells you to do something, you should go for it. Like, if it's good, go for it, right? And that was one of those things where, like, clearly I'm being told to do something. The alternative was just ignore my kid, and he might not ever come up with an idea like that again or want to share it with me anyway. Yeah.
Encouraging kids to, and again, I'm speaking as someone who doesn't have kids, but was a
Yeah.
kid, was a child of someone, and and the in retrospect in my life, I recognize one of the things I'm most grateful for from my parents is that they were both very passionate individuals for the things they're interested in. And observing that passion, being like, okay, they just go for it. Like they love to list the things and they do it. And they're always first to do it. It's a true love for them. And I realized in retrospect that when I developed my own, even if it was just a passing phase, they would always like find a way to support it. It doesn't matter
Right.
how like whatever, football card collecting, which was a thing for me for a bit, and then you get more serious interests as you get older, and showcasing the passion and then not crushing the passion as a parent are such
Right.
things, and it's a unique thing even in that space for your kid to be like, hey, we should start a nonprofit and do something together. I mean, you talk about uh, an ideal thing to share with your child, and a great example of service to continue throughout
Right.
life as well. And that's really at the core of what we wanted to talk about today as well, which is not only, hey, there are a lot of people who sort of like yourself have found themselves doing a passion project that involves service, but also if you're not, even if it doesn't have to be a formalized nonprofit, but like find a need to fill and fill it. in the Church of God.
Yes.
Like we're all called to serve one another. And I think we've gotten into this framework in the Church of God where I'm not really going to do anything unless I'm asked to. Um, and in certain cases, that's fine. Like you don't want to step on someone else's toes if it's already being done. But there's so many
Right.
needs within the Church of God and within the community that could involve you and someone else in the Church of God serving other people together, that like just for our own spiritual development and service, like find something, however small, make it regular, be deliberate, and just start doing it. So I thought it was so great that you and your son started Pops. And so it sounds like to go back into what it does, that it's you're trying in any way possible to fill potential gaps that might be left by only having one parent present, because I'm sure that parent's overextended. You're never really gonna bridge that gap in a complete way, but things like giving them access to people who have skill sets, and maybe that even develops into a male figure in their life, right? Like their piano teacher, their guitar teacher, something like that. Am I understanding the concept correctly?
Exactly. Yeah. It's something in the arts or sports or trades or skills where that single parent probably wouldn't have the utility or the fund base to just pay for that because it's an extra thing, right? Where those things are important, very important. Yeah.
And I think on this front too, so whether you're in the middle of your passion project or someone who maybe needs to identify that need and start doing something, there are sort of best practices, I would say, in terms of as you navigate the start of that kind of initiative, because a lot of us come into it like I think I was sort of the rare case where I got the idea having already, like, I've just come out of an intensive 2 year period learning about how to run nonprofits. But the average person, like someone actually, I'm sure in the Texas area, started late in life a charity that helps folks in Kenya, and
Oh,
she
yes. Uh-huh.
was over there a lot. And it's the passion is such an important thing, but like being able to think about the problem you're trying to solve. Now, sometimes it's as simple as, hey, my bandwidth, because I have a 9 to 5 job and kids and all this kind of stuff, is I can go volunteer at this really good charity once a week. And that's good. Like that's an example of finding a need, helping to fill it. Nonprofits are always in need for help. And in the rare cases where like the Red Cross doesn't need blood, they'll tell you.
Right. Right.
But if it's, I encounter a lot of people that get ideas, but they have a hard time taking it from the idea stage to the execution stage. So
Right.
can you talk a bit about how you, or what principles you and your son used to take the concept and find the way to execute on it? Because I know an early issue when you're growing a nonprofit is even if you have a passion for it, you have limited time and funding, and you also have to understand the population you're trying to serve as well.
Right. Yeah. And it depends on bandwidth, right? How much utility and time you have. You might want to fill like gaps like you're talking about. But for me, since I came out of the nonprofit world and I also worked in city government, county government, I was not afraid of the prospect of putting it together, but it still takes time and effort. Like I remember just looking up, I think it's 501c3.org. It's a cool site where it has a whole country map, and you can just click on each state and it'll tell you what you need to do. Because some states are easy to put a 501c3 together and some aren't. Like, I think I chatted with you a bit about in California, it's big lift
Yeah.
because at a minimum, you have to do double what you have to do in other states. So you have to start EIN number federally, but in California, you also have to do the equivalent for the state. And you have these annual requirements that you have to consider. So depending where you're at, you might want to start in a volunteer capacity, make some connections. You might have some network of friends in your church or through work where they might have similar interests, and you might be able to volunteer somewhere, learn things. And then from there, it'll get to this groundswell where you're like, it's to the point where I could start something, and then you can start doing the paperwork and just do little bits at a time.
Yeah.
I always tried to set aside like 4 hours a week. That was my goal. I set a goal of 4 hours a week and then just plod along till it was ready to go.
Well, that's the thing, and also for context, Aaron's got an MPA the same way I do. So again, probably not super typical of a situation where it was completely without any background in it when you came into it. Um,
Right.
and also for context, anyone listening, if anyone does have an idea and wants help to start it, or just some advice, some just to brainstorm with folks, Church of God Network is always available. I'm sure Aaron would be cool jumping on a call with folks who need a hand. But you tapped into something that I wanted to discuss more, and you mentioned having the discipline to take a certain number of hours a week and just do that on a regular basis. And for me, an issue I see a lot is um, the lack of perseverance, not out of laziness, but just out of the the process itself is important. Like being regularly working on the idea and having incremental goals and being in it for the long haul. Because I know we talked about was I happen to like the phrase. This is sports cliche, but it's one of the few that actually I think has some value, which is love the process. It's do you love the process of doing this act of service? Not are you doing it for whatever the payoff, right? The payoff to me is we're going to fix this issue. Like, okay, well, do you love the process of serving and making incremental progress over time? And having a realistic view of what you can accomplish at what stage and not go, okay, we're going to fix homelessness in LA. Like, okay, well, start smaller, like have a plan to enact positive results and know if this is like, okay, this is going to be 5 hours a week, 4 hours a week. A goal that to end homelessness or to be the leading provider of whatever service is probably not going to be attainable, and it might short circuit the whole thing. But finding an avenue to take and help people in a tangible way, and then just persevere and consistently work on that front, has when I see people do that, usually it pays dividends.
Yeah, like having a target. Like for instance, in my world, the federal government had this goal to end homelessness, this grand goal where it's too broad. And we know biblically the homeless are always going to be among us. It's going to be a thing. Um, but we could end portions of homelessness, like youth out of foster care, the 18 to 24-year olds. That's a population you could focus on, and it's not a large population compared to the whole. And there's a lot of things that you could put energy towards that one population and greatly reduce rent, veteran homelessness or seniors. Like focus, not just the whole thing. So it's true. Like, and you got to have that. I used to give a hard. I was in track and after I used to give hard to sprinters. Like, it's not as hard what you guys do. But the thing is, to do the sprint, we do the same amount of preparation and work to do that race. So the perseverance, the goal to solve it, it's the same. So putting in that time and effort and grit and not giving up, yeah, it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, the finding something that's doable where you also have the ability to affect demonstrable progress. Like you see the people you're affecting. And
Yeah.
That's a big part of service too, getting out of yourself, out of your own head, just getting in front of someone else and serving and along other people. Hopefully, like you said, when it starts out, roping other people in the Church of God who might have similar passions or even just a skill set where they can help out a little bit. It's
Yeah, or expertise, right? Like one of our board members, he's an aeronautical engineer. You're like, wow, that's a pretty finite expertise, but he's got that detail mind,
yeah.
which really helps. So he does our accounting. Like, so he can focus on detail where I'm like, I can do budgets and spreadsheets and all that, but it's not fun for me. Meanwhile, he gets excited about it.
I
And so
love
it's neat, right?
I love it. I love spreadsheets. That's what, well, my background at the think tank were like is just a lot of dealing with hundreds of thousands of rows of data and Excel and stuff like that. So I like the planning part of the nonprofit, and it's like the same side of me. I think that is musical and enjoys creating music, to me, running a nonprofit is a creative process because you have
Yes.
to have that vision. You have to, it's team oriented. You have to take particular steps to construct this thing for an end result. So, but on the front of folks who might be looking to do something, and are currently maybe not involved, what was the what are some things at the outset that were challenges for you that maybe people should be aware of? Anything that, like, okay, this is fairly typical, you're going to feel this way, or you're going to encounter this impediment, be prepared for it?
You touched on it a bit, making sure it's not about yourself, right? Because there's times where if you're worrying about how well you're doing, putting on board meetings can be a challenge because you have to recruit board members. They have to be committed. They have to believe in what you're doing in a meaningful way. But there's times it takes energy, right? So I'm not an extrovert, I'm an introvert. So for me, takes a lot more energy to do those kind of things. So finding a good variety of folks on your board is important, and ensuring that they're committed. So I was very transparent with all my board members that, hey, I need at least 4 hours of your time a month. And if you can commit that and help me in your areas where you have strengths, we'll be golden. And then we can consider if you want to re-up in 2 years. If not, can you help me mentor someone to find a replacement for you? And that's a big thing because as a 501(c)(3), you have these commitments to the government that you make, that you'll do a certain amount of board meetings, you'll review your bylaws at least annually, and you'll try and move the mission along. So that's a big thing.
And I think on that front too, because that might be more specific to, like, if you're going to start an organization. But even keeping in mind, like, I know some folks who helped clean up after tornadoes came through a particular area a year or two ago. And if you're someone who just has the personality where, hey, you want to do something, let's say you're listening and you want to take that step, like, okay, I have the energy, I want to do something to serve. If you can leverage that passion to rope in a few more people to help, to come with you to the area and clean up, even if maybe they wouldn't have thought of it themselves, or maybe they're not as much in the same place. If you just get them there are spillover positive effects. Like in the beginning, there were a lot of people on the board for Church You Got Network that probably were like, I want to support Daniel. He's a friend of mine. And then later on, when over time, maybe they see the vision, or they see some of the fruits, or, you're going to serve your community in some way, and you get someone who maybe wasn't even thinking about serving, gets there and gets affected by the process and realizes, actually, I could do this. I could do this once a quarter. I could do this to put me down going forward to help if this is ever needed again. There's some spillover benefit in the Church of God where people follow passion, which is, yeah. I know you're in the fundraising space more in grant writing, but in the whole, like, asking people for money space of a nonprofit, what I realized that my boss told me a long time ago, which is counterintuitive, people usually want to buy into your passion for the thing. Like, your idea can't be terrible, but
right.
They want to see. They want
criminal. Yeah, it has to be good.
Yeah, it has to have some value. But people are really affected by passion, and I think we underestimate our ability as individuals in God's church to affect other people in a positive way on that front.
Right, and that positivity does rub off. Mm-hmm. Like right now in the nonprofit world, where there's some challenges potentially financially, with my team, I always try and be positive. I'll bring out the dad pun occasionally. I'm just trying to keep that levity and excitement about what we do, because it's kind of a blessing to be able to help people, and then in my case get paid for it. And with our passion project, we don't get paid. It's all volunteer, but something might grow from something, right? You never know, depending on what your passion is. And if you're called to do it and you have a strength there, you never know. Something might come out of it where it supports you as well. But passion's really important. It does rub off.
And I think, like you said, the keeping things positive, because if you're engaged in a form of service where, I mean, it could happen in any, like you go to the soup kitchen once a week, this might apply to you, but negative things are bound to happen. Like you can go volunteer at a place and there be an issue, a crisis, or a really negative event, someone having a really hard time, and it's emotionally taxing. And I feel like anything that has value comes with those challenges, right? If you're an athlete, you're a musician, there are aspects of it that are challenging. You hit plateaus or you have negative experiences, right? You bomb on stage playing a song. If we look at those, like, I have to go through this failure in order to accomplish what this idea needs to accomplish, right? Like a lot of my friends who did stand-up comedy locally, they talk about needing to bomb a lot in the beginning because that's the only way you can get good. And so it's sort of built into that profession, but I think it's similar in the service area. And it could be, I've even told people this when it comes to a lot of congregations are fixed in terms of like who makes the coffee, who's in charge of the refreshments, who sets up the chairs. And a lot of times there's a hesitance to rotate that responsibility because, hey, what if the next person doesn't do it well? That might be like, they might be really bad at it at first, whatever it is, as simple as it might be, but giving people the freedom to fail, and fail or just make mistakes and do it in an environment where there's some emphasis on, like you said, positivity and resiliency. Because especially if you're trying to move the needle on an issue, like you said, especially on an issue which you might never actually fix it. For Church of God Network, people all the time go, well, what if the church is divided like this for a purpose? Like, absolutely. If there could be a reason that the church needs to be like this. And so Church of God Network doesn't pretend to be aimed at the goal of fixing the division in the church. But is it right that we have animosity toward one another? No, we could work on that. Can we be more cooperative? Yes. And so having the right goal, having an achievable goal, and then persevering, because a lot of folks, at least in our line of work, but I'm sure it's the case with every nonprofit. Nonprofits have a high burnout rate, as they call it, as is, because of how emotionally taxing it is. But with Church of God Network, you get people who are really excited. They go through something in their life and they really have this passion for whatever, cooperation or unity. They want to be involved in something. And then when it's not fixed in 3 months, or when it's not fixed in 6 months, there's like, they get disappointed and drained, and they like, oh, well, it's not possible, as opposed to just put one foot in front of the other, take incremental steps. Are you making progress? Be open to changing how you do things too, I think is a big thing. If you're serving, whether you're serving in your congregation or doing something more organized, be open to feedback and the possibility you might need to do something completely different.
True. Yeah. And one thing you touched on is setting expectations and make it realistic. Like in my workspace, we have a domestic violence grant, and we're trying to house 30 households within a year. And we have a new director of the program, and he's trying to house 30 folks month one. And his team's getting overwhelmed, and he's a new manager. And I'm like, have you set these manageable goals that are uncomfortable but achievable? How about month 1, 5, month 2, 10, so you have that sustainability and you don't burn out and give up. And you might miss those goals, or it might be too easy, and that's where you adjust and pivot. And that's important. Otherwise, you also get board members and people that support you. They'll give up. They're like, what's the vision here? What am I supposed to do? You can't just keep throwing stuff. You have to have some plan there. Yeah.
And I think the people around you will respond to, if you try to cultivate the environment of like, I want you to tell me if you think I'm wrong about something, or if you think it could be done better. Because the tendency for us as people, and again, it's whether you're running a nonprofit or whether you're the guy in charge of sound at church, our natural human tendency is to want to think we're doing fine. And it's hard to get critical feedback. But if we reorient ourselves like, well, the goal is more to do this thing well. Like, I want the best sound possible for the congregation. I want pops to help this population the best we can. I I want you to tell me what's wrong. And here, I'll tell you, I'll start the conversation. This is where I think I'm wrong. This is where I think I have problems. I'm not doing a good job at this. Someone help me with this. And if you cultivate where there's not this fear around doing something, maybe in an unideal way, but it's wanting to identify issues proactively so you can get ahead of them or rectify them, because the goal is the mission. The reward is the mission. The reward isn't feeling like you're doing something good.
Right. Yeah, like you brought to mind one thing throughout my life. I like to mentor people just in general before I even got this pops idea. And one of the people, his name's Juan, I've respected throughout my career because he's smarter than me, but I've always tended to be his boss at certain times throughout my career. And I'd give annual reviews to him. And then one time I said, hey, after I do my review, I want you to give me some feedback loop where I can improve as a manager or a boss. And he said this thing to me. He goes, hey, Aaron, you don't have to know everything all the time. And it really like hit me big time, where it took some guts for him to tell me that, hey, Aaron, there's sometimes where you act like you know it all, but you don't. And he was willing to tell me, Aaron, it's okay. You don't have to answer the answers. Involve your team. Ask them for feedback. Like tear it up. Like do your best bet at something, put it together as best you can, and then let's shred it. Let's see, make it better. And
That's a
since then, I'm encouraging people to not beat me up too much, but make the product better. It's not me. Yeah.
well, that's the um that should be seen as a win. Like if you when you get negative feedback from some, and this is really hard, but when you get negative feedback from someone, it almost doesn't matter how it's delivered, even if it's like really poorly delivered and obnoxious. There's an element where like, well, that's still kind of a win, because
Right.
I now know that this person probably represents the views of some other people. Like this is a viewpoint
Right.
that's out there. Doesn't matter whether I know about it or not. It's out there. I now know about it and can evaluate whether that feedback is accurate, or hey, we now have the opportunity to rectify something that, because the whenever something comes up that might blow up this idea of, well, are we doing things the best way we could, or is this a, I mean, what you're really talking about is an element of conversion, because that's what we're supposed to be engaging with God on, which is as we take in his nature and slowly he reveals to us our true nature, we are slowly but consistently finding out where we are off base from his standard. And the same principle we should be applying to the discrete activities we do. Again, whether
Sure.
serving in the church or serving in our conversion capacity, but maybe serving folks outside the church, do we demonstrate the same attitude of conversion, which is applicable across various aspects of our lives?
Yeah, because before we were talking, I took our dog Don. He's an Airedale Terrier. Took him on a walk, and I was listening to one of your podcasts because I've never really done a podcast before, so I want to do it. And it was the one with your brother, the guy with the curly hair,
Mm-hmm.
Joseph. Was that right? Yeah.
Steve.
Well, Stephen. That's right. And it was interesting because you were talking about good and evil,
Mm-hmm.
and while I was walking, I was thinking about one scripture I was talking about, Colossians 3:23, like pursuing with all your might, that concept of going for it. And I was like, yeah, that should be true because there's a scripture where God says, don't be like lukewarm, do one or the other, like full in. I'd rather you be fully evil or fully good, not just nothing. And so pursuing that passion. So I just always tell my kids, do everything you can. If it's doing the dishes, do it well. If it's putting out the garbage, do it well. And just applying that to everything and just the little things. And then it just becomes this life habit, like make the coffee well. Like everything's, you could do everything that way you can. And if you approach life that way in that positive energy, it can be easy. You can get this place where it's great. And then, of course, you get sick and life events happen and you get off track. But if you've made that a life habit, you'll get back to it.
Well,
So
that's the process thing. Like
yeah,
I just a story about how it affected me, because one of the things I tell people is that this, like when you choose to go into a area of service wholeheartedly, it will change you. Like
yeah,
it'll, I mean, it's obviously going to push you in ways you didn't realize. But and again, it doesn't matter if it's starting to song lead or give messages. Like when I started to speak, that it changes your study habits in a hugely positive way that
oh yeah,
you just don't know going in. Like you don't know what you don't know. But
yeah,
with Church of God Network, and not only that, but my other friends who I've seen start initiatives, there's I tell people that it fundamentally changed who I was. Like before getting the idea for it, um, I was very much well, I'll get a job that's just, something I can tolerate and work a 9 to 5 and have that hard boundary and my focus, I'll find my passion or my outlets other places, which is great. But the moment I felt compelled to do something different and started doing it, it's like, oh, I'm addicted to it now. Like the opposite becomes the case. Like, okay, now how do I set boundaries for myself so that
right.
it's not like every night till midnight, but you get onto that kick where that sort of helps, like you say, when you do get sick or when you have a challenge, it when you fall in love with the component parts, like you said, it's the uh, it changes your perspective about the work the more you do it. Like it becomes less of this thing you have to do and more a thing you get to do.
Right. Yeah, like I love to do carpentry, and it's saying that I don't have time. It's not going to create a career for me, but it's saying that I value it and I make the most of that time, and I try and not take advantage of that. And it's because you don't want to become a doom scroller kind of person where you're just wasting your time away. You want to create that balance in life, and if you can, um, the work life balance, it's really important. Like when you mentioned that, there's this podcaster really he does crime podcasting, very incredible stuff he does. He packages it really well. But he did a podcast yesterday. He goes, just so you know, I've the reason it does so well is I have this whole team that works with me and supports me. But he says, my problem is I love it so much. I spend 12 to 15 hours each day reviewing everything they've done. And he goes, my team's told me it's not healthy. You've got to figure something out because you're not. He goes, this is my life. He goes, I don't want to have kids. This is what I want to do. And I admire what he wants to do, but he's acknowledging that you have to have that balance. It's essential.
And
Yeah.
that's a good, probably one of the maybe final things we can discuss, because I was speaking with who was it? Uh, it was someone else who was similar. Like they might be running something in the Church of God, sort of like a charity or a nonprofit. But it was a friend of mine who just went from he was working in a particular field and branched out and started his own business in that same field. And
Okay.
it's the same thing, even though it's not, classically a service thing, because it's not a nonprofit. It's not like you're serving in church. It is because you're selling a service. We were commiserating about how, yeah, it's awesome. It changes you. It turns you from someone who just wants to punch in at 9 and out at 5 to like, well, I want to do this all the time. This is great. But
Job versus career, right? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And the other side is, and we're coming from it from two different perspectives. He's married with a bunch of kids, and so you can't do that because that's an unhealthy
Right.
lifestyle for your family. And
Yes.
I've heard stories of people treating service in the church the same way. I mean, it's a little bit less now because there isn't quite as much going on ancillary to church services that there was in like the 80s, where you had a million things to do. And even things like the foot washing on Passover was a monumental effort because there was hundreds of people at the same time. But there were people who service to the church even became at the detriment to their family. And
Yeah,
from
I was a victim of that. Yeah, my dad was full in, and family was secondary, and he was only breadwinner. But that's true. It was all consuming for a period in the 80s. Yeah.
and it's a tough balance to walk, especially when you love it. But
Yeah.
I'm coming at it from the other point of view, which is I'm a guy who's been single a bit longer than folks normally are, and so when I start dating someone, how do you slowly integrate someone else into your life, and then thinking about, okay, well, if I get married, have kids, how do I start thinking now about not setting these precedents for unhealthy lifestyles later where there is no boundary. So even in service, the church pursuing a good goal, you could be doing it in a way that's destructive, which not only applies to your own life, but it's also something to keep in mind when we deal with these initiatives of service, where just because the intention is right doesn't mean any way to go about solving the problem is helpful. There are plenty of nonprofit lessons that have been learned over the last several decades where the sector had thought the best way to solve whatever the poverty or hunger in the developing world was direct dumping of rice on a population free of charge. And we've learned, no, it like crushes the economy long term. It changes eating habits, like not being simplistic in your thinking when trying to solve whatever problem you are, whether it's in the church or your particular service area of choice. I'm sure you and your son had to deal with that with pops.
Right. And you touched on like trying to solve it with food. Like, for instance, I was hired as a consultant in accounting once, and they were researching how to navigate with homelessness, and they started with food. And they found like there was 10 nonprofits providing lunches on a given day in the city. And the homeless population would shop around and they would pick their favorite lunches. And if they didn't like the lunch, they dump it and throw it away. And it took us a year, but we finally got all those folks to work together and say, Monday you do it, Tuesday you do it. But you're right, it's kind of crazy how if you don't thoughtfully do it. And looking back, like some of the years when I had young kids, I'd have a grant to write and I'd work 15 hours, right? And I'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. I got the grant. But then the next day I work 15 hours. Looking back on it, and I tell my team this now, I learned it, is if you take 10 hours to 12 hours one day, you've got to get it back. You've got to get it back on another day. You got to honor your time because that's the only resource you're not getting more physically on this planet, right? And our physical walk, we got a little amount of time. It's not a lot. And we should try to remember that. And your team helping each other. So if you're doing a nonprofit, that mutual respect, hey, Aaron, tap out, buddy. Or you tell one of the people you're working with, tap out, spend some time with family. I just want you to be a fun person to still work with. You know what I mean?
And it also gives other people the opportunity to step up in a lot of cases. Like
True.
sometimes if a nonprofit is squeezed for resources, maybe not, maybe it just means everyone's doing too much. And that's probably a lesson for the leader that you need
Right.
funding to get more people. But in the church, the same thing can happen. So many people serve and overextend themselves and don't know how to say no to things because they feel bad about it. And we as fellow members of the body can go to them and say, hey, I'll step in and do this, give it a rest. Like we'll train someone else to do this. It gets other people.
Involve the youth, get them engaged, right? Yeah.
And if you're watching this and it's, and you see someone, maybe that's the way you step in. You see a need and just fill it. Is you see someone who's doing too much. What burden can I take off of you? Maybe it's your pastor. Like, is he bogged down in some sort of administrative thing that like members of the congregation could solve on their own and not have to put it on one guy? Like, there's a lot of different creative ways to go about that. And on that same front too, one of the things that you mentioned when we were talking before the podcast was also keeping in mind when you engage in some sort of form of service, the goal is to eventually either put yourself out of business or deal with the problem so well that you have to go on and focus on something different. And I guess sometimes you might know there's a built-in, this is always going to be around, right? Especially if you're Christian, well, the poor will always be with us. So some things are built in permanently, right? The preaching of the gospel, I don't know. There's certain things that will go on eternally in this physical life, at least until Christ comes. But by and large, it's about not trying to prop up your own existence just so you can say you exist, right? Not to continue to do some sort of service project just because you want to say you do this service thing, but to be filling or accomplishing or as much as you can addressing and fixing an issue.
Yeah, because in the nonprofit world, it's competitive as well, right? And trying to have that headspace where you're there to make the community better. And if you have that vision and you try and recalibrate people where they're trying to say, why are you muscling in here? No, I just want to learn the environment. Is there a need? Can I fill that need? Uh, it's surprising, though, there's finite resources. There's always a need to collaborate. There always is, and not not supplant efforts. Try and build upon effort, support, not come and cause challenges. And like every community, no matter how small it is, there's somewhere where you can make it better. And when you read certain Bible scriptures and look at certain times in society, there's been times where it was community based and you were connected to community and you walked and you knew people like that old Cheers thing. You knew everyone, right? Um, we've gotten away with that with technology. And I think it's kind of important for us not to forget to be part of our community. We're supposed to be in it, not of it. So we should still do our efforts to make it better. And if you got that mindset, you're going to find a need. You definitely are.
There's
It's
no
going to be
shortage.
there.
There's no shortage.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
would contend in this at this stage in the Church of God's history, there is no shortage of need in the Church of God. Like I think we probably have
Yeah,
enough to consume our bandwidth just within the Church of God. But if you
true.
happen to be in a situation where that's sort of, I don't know, I'd imagine parts of Texas might have a lot of people. If they all started trying to address need, maybe some people would need to do focus outward. But that itself is a reflective of the Church of God sort of issue or need. Like, okay, let's serve outwardly more. Like, let's start
Yeah,
chipping away at that issue. But when I brought up the whole focus on addressing or fixing a need rather than just justifying your own existence or continuing to exist, I say that because and you brought this up because that's what the competitive lunch example that you mentioned reminded me of this because we do similar things in the Church of God, which is um, rather than think, is someone else already doing this? Let me really understand the landscape of this need I'm trying to fill and find a niche. And when I say niche, it doesn't need to
niche.
be tiny, but like just find a way that, because I think the tendency would be for those organizations that are all doing lunches, it's an easy thing to go, oh, we're providing lunches. It's sort of straightforward. It is easy to understand for people who might want to donate to it, right? Provide lunches to the homeless. So the desire would be, okay, well, let's not question this. Let's not question whether this is
Right.
successful because people are getting food, they're coming. But then if you take a step back and realize, well, there are six companies doing the same thing and it's not actually helping anyone because we're doing the same thing. The Church of God
Yeah.
often does the same thing where we're duplicating effort.
Yeah.
And someone will get an idea and go, well, this would be really great to do. And I tell people often, well, actually, this is already being worked on by this person. Would you want to help them do that? Or,
Right.
what'd be really helpful is take this avenue, like look at this aspect of the problem and address this. This is not being addressed. And sometimes, and I think we need to not fall prey to this or having a preconceived notion of how we want to fill a need, because sometimes folks do, like they get attached to the
True.
how where
Right.
I want to serve in this way that I have predefined. And that can also be destructive because if that's not what's needed, then you're not really serving anybody. So it's about being having your idea be flexible as you discover, okay, well, this isn't what I should do. We should do this, and not just go, well, I'm going to do this anyway because this is confirmation bias. This is just what I want to do, so I'm going to find a way to justify doing what I already set my mind on.
Yeah. Being open-minded because there is that narrow path to something, but being malleable, being able to be led to it, not being, yeah, this is the way to do it, and go full in and just bulldoze through because you won't get a better product. You'll miss stuff. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for the last thing maybe to touch on, and we've already kind of done this a bit, especially with what we were just talking about, but um, what are some things to that we haven't touched on to avoid or to look out for when you're trying to serve other people? Again, it can be in the nonprofit space or it can be just sort of at the congregational level. Um, that you've seen over your years, both in the church and sort of formally in the nonprofit world?
Well, be observant. That's very important, right? And it, depending where you're at in your life, there's times where you can serve different groups, right? Like when I had little kids, I would do a lot of service things for kids where I had children and it would be a win-win. Now that my kids are in their mid-teens to early 20s, there's a kind of a gap to serve them. For instance, my son goes, "Hey, Aaron, I remember during COVID, we used to go on these long wilderness hikes." He goes, "My friends want to do that." So I said, "Okay, I'm going to get together a bunch of the old dads, the decrepit 50-year-olds like me, and we're going to get back in enough shape so we can take these kids on a wilderness thing and have kind of a young men's retreat, get out in nature, talk about stuff, kind of like David walk up on the way and talk about it, right?" And that way they get to have some camaraderie. And those are things that are not coming up from the church, but it's something that's been brought to my attention. And ask around, ask your respective peer group if there's a desire to do it. And there is in this case. So we're going to make time for it because those things are so fleeting, those little opportunities in life. Like, and if you're a senior,
Don't waste an
volunteer to,
opportunity is a good phrase. Don't let an opportunity to serve go to waste.
yeah, if you're a senior, offer to tell about your story because like nowadays that's lost where the elders tell their cool stories. If they served in the war or they had these life events, they've got some cool stories, but I don't see many people sitting down and asking to hear them. So the senior might need to volunteer to do that. And you never know, the group might go, "Yeah, I'm interested."
Yeah.
If it all would be to honor that person, at first they might be like, "That sounds boring." But if they honor the senior and they share a story, you might be surprised. They've got some cool stories.
Yeah.
So those are some ideas, just being observant and seeing the situation and making the most of it.
And it sounds like you're
And
all
slow
saying,
down. Yeah.
yeah, slow. That's a good one. That's one I didn't think about,
Yeah.
but I've seen so often is, um, there's the balance between thinking about something for too long. Like one of the things I had that I wrote down was don't let talking about it or thinking about it prevent you from doing something. Like don't stay in that stage for too long because people get bogged down there. But then, like you said, there's the opposite problem where you're going too fast. Like you haven't learned enough about the thing or how to address the issue before. Like it's growing beyond the foundation that is set up for it already. But one of the things that came to mind when you were speaking was to be creative, to don't let yourself get tied into an existing model for how to address something. Like I think human beings are limited to go, well, this is how you address this problem. And since I don't know how to do that, I can't serve in that way or whatever it is. But being creative
Right.
and thinking, well, what's the problem at hand? Is there a way to leverage my skill set to help this person or to help in this situation or to address a need that maybe other folks haven't realized is one yet, but maybe I can perceive that. So don't let your previous experience limit yourself and your ideas for how to serve from the church.
Yeah. And God gave us all a gift. We've all got a gift, and they're like a puzzle. And sometimes a person might not have that confidence to use it or test it or refine it. The other thing is life gets busy, and there's times where you just need to step out and take a quick walk. People say, "You don't have time. You got too many meetings. You got too much stuff." There's always time to take 10 minutes to walk and think and come back. And that 10 minutes that you lost, you'll probably, the next 10 minutes, will you get twice the amount of work done for sure. So yeah, that's what I found. Because I had a CEO that told me that. He goes, "Aaron, this job that you got now, it's one I've been at 2 years. If you don't take that time, your time, you're going to be in trouble." That's pretty much the only thing he really talked to me about an hour before they hired me. He just got that into my skull. Take your time, take your time. And if you're a motivated person, you got passion and you don't tend to waste a lot of time, but you might be wasting time if you're not valuing that time away. you know?
You need to, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really good advice because you need space to be creative. Like the creative thinking comes when you take that 10 minutes to not get bogged
Yeah.
down in the whirlwind of what you're doing day to day, just to sort of like keep the ships afloat, but to think creatively. And a lot of times it's when you're doing nothing, like it in the shower,
Right.
and ideas will come, or you're taking a walk, something you're meditating while doing something else, which is not only a lesson for work, but I think if you're doing Bible study, there's a point at which stepping away from the study and meditating on it for a period of time, just mulling it over, allows things to get more creative. But
Yeah.
you've sort of answered it preemptively. But I was going to say the last question I have is so I'll give mine first to give you time to think about a
Okay.
different one. But what is one piece of advice someone gave you on the service front? So it could be in the church, it could be professionally, nonprofits, in terms of serving or taking a step out and starting something that has stuck with you, like a really good piece of advice. So for me, it was, and it's our mutual friend Isaac Garcia, who's on
Okay.
Church
Yeah.
Again Network's board. Um, when I first got the idea for Church Again Network, and maybe I talked to like three people, and Isaac came to mind as someone I needed when I got back home to call and talk with because he's an entrepreneur and everything. I wanted his advice. I said, "Hey, I have this idea. I want to talk with you about it. Can we get on the phone?" And the first thing he said to me, I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but I don't know. That's another problem with
Well,
doing
I haven't heard it,
podcasts
so
is like you forget what you said before. But Isaac,
one person wants to listen to it at least.
right. So the Isaac gets on the phone with me and he goes, before you say anything at all, he goes, do it. I don't care what it is. Do it. Now tell me what the idea is. So like it's the idea, the sort of Nike idea of just do it. Like you do it well, do it prayerfully, do it with counsel. Don't do it recklessly or irresponsibly, but just do it. You got nothing. You got, if you do it and you try to go about it the right way, you will learn. People will be served in some capacity, but don't overthink the step of going from zero to just doing something.
Yeah, like one of my fans, because I grew up in Canada, is Wayne Gretzky. You miss
Mhm.
100% of the shots you don't take. Like that, do it. That's true. For me, the one thing in my dad actually taught me this because, like I said, I'm more of an introvert by nature, and he was in the sales industry for a period of his life, and he had me do sales for a couple of years, and I'm like, I
Ouch.
don't, I, I don't want to do it. It's not, it's gonna drain me like crazy. But he sat down, and he goes, son, you don't have to sell anything. You just need to teach them about the project. Teach. So whatever you do, get to know it so well that you can teach it and they'll believe. And if you can do that, then you'll be successful. And like you were touching on where you do a sermon or something, you learn that subject so well because you don't want to let down the listeners. It's a kind of high calling where you're like teaching, preaching, different things like that. You're like, people might listen to me. They might take it to heart. And if they do, that's pretty intense. Like parenting, it's the same thing. You want to get it right. So to me, that advice stuck. Like, get so good at it, you can be the teacher of it, and people will listen. So that stuck with me, and now I can sell anything because I'm actually not selling it. I'm teaching it.
That's a really great tie-in to the earlier point as well about your job as a nonprofit is to put yourself out of business. I think this is like the
Yes.
equivalent. This is the individual equivalent, which is whatever you're doing to serve, do it so well you could teach it to someone else, then teach it to someone else to replace you doing that thing, so then they could do it,
Yes.
and then you cycle off to something else. And I was speaking with
Yeah.
an elder in Kagwa a couple weeks ago, and he was saying how now sometimes this reality in the church exists where it's very hard to do, but in an ideal world, it'd be like the priestly structure where at a
Oh, I
certain age,
love that.
the
Yeah.
priest
The 20
rotate
to
off
30,
a certain,
the
yeah,
30 to 50.
that you would
Yeah. I love
rotate
it.
out of a certain set of
Yeah.
duties so that you weren't doing the same thing for too long, and other people could come in and learn from you, and you would have that opportunity to teach. They would come in and fill the spot. You get a lot of different skill sets as you, like you say, as you get to different points in your life, your capacity to serve and the areas you might be good at serving or wanting to learn to serve fit that particular time in your life, so you're learning new skills continually. So that's a great tie-in. Learn,
Yeah.
find something. If you take nothing away from the podcast, is find a need, fill it, and then learn everything about it so you can teach someone else to do it and then find something else. That's a great,
Perfect.
great takeaway.
Yeah. We planned it that way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, Aaron. It was a pleasure. I'm sure we'll be in touch soon. Not too many nonprofit folks in the Church of God, but hopefully maybe this will change it, inspire some people to get into the sector more.
Yeah, I'm grateful we crossed paths. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah.
Likewise.
Blessings.